The pain we bury in childhood always finds its way back home. Let that sit with you for a moment, because sometimes the deepest cuts don't come from strangers. They don't come from enemies. They come from the ones who used to fall asleep in your lap, who once held your finger just to feel safe in the world. My friends, the most haunting form of cruelty isn't loud, it's personal. And today, we're opening a door that most people slam shut because it hurts too much to even name. So here's the question no one wants to ask out loud. Why does a son humiliate the very woman who gave him life? This isn't just family drama. This is psychological warfare between two generations, mother and son, tied together by love, guilt, shadow, and silence. And today, we're not doing surface-level answers. We're going deep into the why, not to blame, but to uncover, to pull back the curtain on the unconscious pain that never got spoken, never got healed, and now shows up as sarcasm, avoidance, and cold disrespect. But before we dive in, I want to ask you for something. If you've ever felt this, if you've ever watched this play out between a mother and son, or even lived it, then take 1 second right now. Like this video. Hit subscribe. I'm not here to talk at you. I'm putting my heart into this, my soul into this. And if you're someone who values truth over comfort, then your support means everything. Now let me take you there. Imagine this. A woman, older now, softer, slower, asks her son if he could help move a box or fix a shelf, and instead of kindness, he sighs, rolls his eyes. Maybe he mocks her, maybe he ignores her, maybe he posts a joke online that she doesn't even understand, but deep down she feels she's the punchline. That box wasn't heavy. What's heavy is the memory she carries, of all the times she carried him, of sleepless nights, of whispered lullabies, of watching him grow, fall, rise again. And now, that love is met with distance, or worse, contempt. But here's the twist no one talks about. His cruelty, it's not about her, it's about him, his helplessness, his shame, his unresolved inner war with the part of himself that once needed her too much. A man doesn't attack his mother because she's weak. He attacks her because she knows him too well, because her love reminds him of a time when he wasn't strong, wasn't in control, wasn't untouchable. Carl Jung said, what we fight in others is often what we cannot bear in ourselves. So when a son lashes out at the woman who raised him, you better believe he's not just fighting her, he's fighting his reflection. And the tragedy, the more he humiliates her, the more he disconnects from the very part of himself that once knew how to love without shame. But we're here to end the silence. We're here to crack this wide open, and it starts now. If this touched something inside you, type these words in the comments right now. Awareness ends the curse. Say it like you mean it. Write it like you're drawing a line in the sand, because the first step to healing is telling the truth about the wound. Now stay with me, because what you're about to hear next might just explain a lifetime of confusion and give you the key to breaking the cycle. Number one, he's not fighting you. He's fighting his helplessness. A man doesn't rage against his mother because she failed him. He rages because her love reminds him of who he used to be before he could protect himself. Let that hit, because this is where it begins, not with hatred, not with evil, but with a wound. And that wound, my friends, is helplessness. That terrifying, suffocating feeling of needing someone so much you forget who you are without them. Now picture this. A grown man walks into a room where his mother speaks with pride about how she raised him. Maybe she says, "You used to cry every time I left the room," or "I had to hold your hand to fall asleep." She says it with love, nostalgia, a soft smile. But you see it. His jaw clenches, his body stiffens. Maybe he snaps. Maybe he mocks her in front of others. Maybe he says something cruel and cold, so sharp it cuts through her like glass. And you think, why so harsh? Why so defensive? Why so angry over a memory? Because, my friends, she didn't just recall a story. She resurrected a part of him he buried, the part that was fragile, scared, dependent. And now that he's spent years building a mask of toughness, of control, of independence, her words tear that mask right off. And you see, when a son humiliates his mother, it's not because he sees her as weak. It's because her presence awakens the version of himself he can't stand to remember. The child who cried, the child who clung, the child who once needed her to survive. And that memory, it feels like a trap, because to him, dependence equals danger. So he lashes out, not to hurt her, but to protect himself from the ghost of his own vulnerability. Jung told us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is not fate. This is programming. And unless it's brought to light, the son will keep rewriting his pain over and over by turning the one who loved him most into his emotional battlefield. Now I know what some of you are asking. But what did I do wrong? What did I do to deserve this coldness? Let me say it loud. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just there, in the room, in the memory, in the energy. You were the mirror that showed him what he spent a lifetime trying not to feel. And for the sons listening, if this stirred something in you, don't run from it. Helplessness isn't weakness, it's a wound. And wounds can heal, but only if you stop swinging at the hands that once held you. So what do we do with this truth? We bring it into the light. We stop playing out the same old scripts in silence. We look at that angry voice, not as the villain, but as the child who never got to say, I was scared. If this hit you in the chest, then write this in the comments right now. I'm not the enemy. I was the mirror. Say it. Own it. Because once you realize this fight was never really about you, you can stop trying to win it and start healing from it. And trust me, what we uncover next, it goes even deeper. Because soon we're going to talk about how a mother becomes more than just a woman in his mind. She becomes an archetype, a symbol of comfort and captivity. Stay with me, it's about to get raw. Number 2, the mother as an archetype, not a person. An archetype isn't just a memory, it's a myth you live inside without knowing it. And no archetype carries more emotional weight in a man's psyche than the mother. She's not just mom anymore. She becomes a symbol, a presence, a force of nature that doesn't just exist outside of him, but within him. Carl Jung knew this all too well. He said the mother isn't just a woman in our past, she's a psychological blueprint. She represents everything primal: warmth, security, protection, but also dependence, fusion, loss of self. So when a son tries to distance himself from his mother, he's not just dealing with a person. He's trying to push away the entire myth of who she became inside his mind. Imagine trying to push down a river with your bare hands. That's what it feels like when a man tries to emotionally separate from his mother without truly individuating, without understanding what she became in his psyche. He's fighting an invisible current, one that makes him feel trapped even when she says nothing at all. And that's why he might snap at her presence, mock her softness, or flinch when she gets too close. Not because he hates her, but because she represents something too big to control. In her smile, he sees sacrifice. In her voice, he hears obligation. And in every moment of affection, he feels the weight of needing her all over again. That's the trap. And so in desperation to feel like his own man, he humiliates her, mocks the archetype. But here's the tragedy. In trying to destroy that grip, he doesn't just cut himself free, he cuts off his own capacity for softness. Because you can't kill one side of the archetype without wounding the other. The same symbol that held him captive also taught him how to feel, how to nurture, how to care. And when he rages against the mother, he rages against the nurturer in himself. Jung wrote, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And for many men, that means facing the maternal within, the part that still longs for safety, for affection, for grace, not because they're weak, but because they're human. So if this part hit home, write it in the comments. She was my symbol. I am reclaiming myself. And stick with me, because in the next section, we're about to explore something even deeper. What happens when love is too big to name, and how that unspoken overwhelm turns into rage. Number 3, revenge for love that felt too big. Unspoken love doesn't disappear, it mutates. It doesn't fade. It doesn't dissolve. It shifts shape. And in the case of many sons, it transforms into something darker, more twisted, more dangerous. Rage. This might sound backwards to some. Why would a son be angry at the woman who gave everything for him? But here's the bitter truth most people won't say out loud. Some men don't know how to carry that much love. They were never taught how to receive it, never shown how to hold space for sacrifice without guilt or affection without suffocation. So instead of sitting in that emotional depth, they run from it. Or worse, they fight it. Imagine giving someone a priceless gift they never asked for. You place it in their hands, smiling, crying, full of devotion, and they just stare at it, confused, burdened, unsure what to do with something so fragile. That's what a mother's sacrifice feels like to a son who hasn't developed emotional language. He doesn't know how to say, "thank you." So his nervous system translates that gratitude into pressure. Pressure into shame. Shame into anger. And then it happens. She grows older, slower, more visibly human. She asks for help, for support, for presence. And instead of meeting that moment with compassion, he meets it with cruelty. Because now he's the one in control. And that control doesn't feel like peace. It feels like revenge. Revenge for the emotional debt he never consented to. Revenge for the weight of love he never had the tools to carry. Revenge for feeling so vulnerable, so seen, so shaped by a force he couldn't push away. He doesn't hate her, he hates the helplessness she represents. And when he sees her fragile, his fear gets triggered all over again. Not for her, but for the part of himself he still hasn't made peace with. So what does he do? He creates distance through domination. He mocks her, corrects her, dismisses her stories, rolls his eyes at her requests. Not because she's done anything wrong, but because being near her makes him feel emotionally bankrupt all over again. Jung said, "Where love rules, there is no will to power." But when love is too big to handle, some men trade vulnerability for control. And that control gets expressed not in strength, but in domination over the very person who once sacrificed everything for them. So if this stirred something inside you, write this in the comments. Her love was not my prison. Say it, mean it, because once you recognize that her sacrifice was an offering, not a trap, you begin to free both of you. And stay with me, because next, we're going to talk about the moment where everything shifts, when the mother's memory becomes a threat to the son's identity, and why her pride in him feels like an attack on his freedom. Number 4, the mother reminds him who he used to be. The past, when left unhealed, doesn't just haunt, it humiliates. And for a man who's spent his adult life trying to build strength, power, and independence, there's one person whose memory can break all of that in an instant: his mother. Not because she tries to, not because she uses it against him, but because she remembers. She remembers the tears. She remembers the trembling hands. She remembers the nights when he couldn't sleep unless she sat on the edge of the bed. And while the world may see him now as composed, successful, emotionally untouchable, she saw the version of him that had no armor, no pride, just need. That's the threat, not her actions. Her witnessing. Imagine trying to build a castle of steel, brick by brick, then realizing there's someone who still holds the blueprint to the straw hut you once lived in. That's what his mother represents. She doesn't threaten his strength through criticism. She threatens it through intimacy, through memory, through knowing too much. So he lashes out, not at what she says, but at what she remembers. This is where so many women feel blindsided. He treats everyone with respect, but when he's around me, he's cold, sarcastic, dismissive. And you wonder why? Because you remind him that he was once small, once afraid, once needy. And that memory doesn't fit into the image he's trying to project. Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." So instead of facing the child he once was, he punishes the woman who saw that child in full view. But here's the tragedy. In rejecting your memory of him, he's rejecting himself. He thinks he's pushing you away, but what he's really doing is cutting off access to his own humanity. Because you, his mother, are not just a person. You are the living archive of his becoming. And he doesn't know how to be both strong and remembered as fragile. So what does he do? He attacks what he cannot erase. He silences the witness. Not to destroy you, but to disappear from himself. But you don't have to carry the blame. You didn't make him fragile. You just loved him through it. And that kind of love, it's not a weakness. It's a gift he hasn't learned how to unwrap. If this cracks something open for you, type these words in the comments: "I am not his threat. I am his witness." Say it like truth. Say it like power. because what's coming next, it gets even more raw. We're going to look at how projection distorts everything, and how a son, unable to face his inner wounds, starts blaming you for what he cannot accept in himself. Stay close. Number 5, projection turning her into his shadow. We don't see people as they are, we see them as we are. And nowhere is this more dangerous, more intimate, more tragic than between a son and his mother. See, when a man humiliates his mother, it's rarely about her. It's about the parts of himself that she unintentionally reflects back. Her tenderness, that reminds him of the softness he was taught to suppress. Her emotional honesty, that mirrors the vulnerability he locked behind performance. Her care, that reminds him just how deeply he still wants to be held, even as he runs from that truth. Jung called this projection. When we haven't made peace with our inner world, we unconsciously cast those rejected pieces onto others, and then attack them for carrying what we refuse to own. So when a son mocks his mother's sensitivity, it's because her tears make his own feel unsafe. When he ridicules her attachment, it's because he never learned how to healthily navigate his own. He turns her into a caricature, too emotional, too clingy, too much, because the truth is, he sees himself in her. And that's what he can't stand. Picture this. You're standing in front of a mirror that shows you not just your face, but every hidden feeling you've ever buried. Now imagine that mirror speaks, smiles, forgives, loves you, even when you flinch. That's what the mother becomes. Not a person, a reflection. So when he humiliates her, corrects her, mocks her, he's not attacking who she is. He's trying to exercise the parts of himself that feel too soft to be safe. He projects his shame onto her, hoping if he can silence her, he'll silence it. But it never works, because you can't outrun your shadow by beating it down in someone else. And the more he fights her, the more entangled he becomes. Jung said, "The shadow is everything about ourselves we do not want to face." And often, the mother becomes the first place a man sees that shadow reflected back, raw, unfiltered, undeniable. So to every mother who's been made the scapegoat for what your son cannot face in himself, breathe. You are not the flaw, you are the mirror. And sometimes being a mirror means catching a reflection someone's not ready to love yet. If you feel that truth in your soul, type it below. I am not the problem, I am the mirror. Say it with power. Say it for every woman who's carried the blame for someone else's buried pain. And stay with me, because next we're going to explore the mother's side of this. How sometimes her silence in the face of humiliation isn't weakness. It's an unconscious role she's playing, one that has its own deep psychological roots. Number 6, when rebellion becomes a ritual. Immature men don't rebel to be free. They rebel because they don't know how to separate with love. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. This isn't a teenage outburst. This is a grown man, deep into adulthood, still stuck in the emotional choreography of rebellion. Only now the stakes are higher and the damage cuts deeper. You see, real rebellion ends with growth. But ritual rebellion, that's just a loop, a repetitive, compulsive, emotional twitch disguised as power. He lashes out, she stays silent, and he storms off, she forgives. Then it begins again. The son who humiliates his mother isn't just expressing anger. He's playing out a performance of separation that never completed. It's like watching someone try to finish a sentence they've been repeating for 20 years. He says, "I don't need you." But underneath that, he's screaming, "Please let me go without guilt. Please let me go without fear." But because he never learned how to separate with emotional maturity, he uses cruelty as his exit. And here's the trap. Every time he humiliates her thinking he's cutting ties, he's actually binding himself closer. Because rage doesn't break the bond, rage feeds it. He may walk away physically, but emotionally, he's still a son orbiting his mother's gravity. Why? Because he hasn't individuated. He hasn't fully become his own man. He's just trying to carve out space, but he's using a hammer when what he needs is boundaries and inner work. Imagine trying to cut down a tree while chained to it. That's what this looks like, and both people bleed. Jung wrote, individuation is the process of becoming the person you were always meant to be. But individuation isn't rebellion, It's not humiliation, it's maturity. It's the ability to say, you gave me life, now I must build my own. And I can do that without destroying you in the process. But until he reaches that level of awareness, the rebellion continues, not as power, but as pain in disguise. And for the mother, every time she absorbs that humiliation in silence, she unconsciously affirms the cycle. She allows the ritual to continue, believing that love means endurance. If that cycle sounds too familiar, speak truth in the comments. I'm done dancing with rebellion. Let it be a declaration, let it be a turning point, and stick with me, because next we're going to uncover her unconscious role in this pattern, how even the most devoted mothers sometimes stay too long in sacrifice and forget to choose themselves. Number 7, the silent mother and the power he feels over her. What you allow is what will continue. And sometimes, my friends, the most dangerous teacher in a man's life is a silent, self-sacrificing mother. Let's get honest. Not every son who humiliates his mother is met with boundaries. Some are met with lowered eyes, quiet dinners, and unconditional forgiveness. And while that might sound noble on the surface, let's break the illusion. Endurance is not always love. Sometimes it's conditioning. Sometimes it's a woman who was taught that her worth lives in how much she can take without breaking. You see, when a mother keeps absorbing blow after blow, emotionally, verbally, energetically, it doesn't teach the son gratitude. It teaches him entitlement. It teaches him that her heart is his punching bag, that her devotion is infinite, and her self-respect negotiable. And here's the psychological twist. The more she tolerates, the more he tests. Because deep down, he's not just acting out rage. He's searching for a wall, a limit, a signal that someone loves themselves enough to not accept humiliation as the price of closeness. But when she doesn't push back, when she stays, when she smiles through the pain or explains it away with, "He's just stressed," she becomes the accomplice to her own emotional erosion, not because she's weak, but because she was never taught that real love has boundaries. And the son, he starts to feel powerful, but not the healthy kind, not the strength that builds, the kind of power that corrodes. Because what's more intoxicating to the ego than the ability to hurt someone and have them stay anyway? Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And in this dynamic, the darkness is mutual, and the mother is not to blame, but she is part of the pattern. And until she recognizes that her silence is a message, the son will continue to misread love as permission. So if you've ever swallowed your voice to keep the peace, if you've ever accepted less in the name of holding the family together, it's time to rewrite the story. Write this in the comments like you mean it. My silence is not love. Because it's not. Love without self-respect is martyrdom. And martyrdom doesn't raise men, it raises monsters. Stay with me, because in the next section, we're going to dig into the childhood roots behind this cycle, and how unhealed family history turns a mother into a scapegoat for pain that started long before she was ever the problem. Number 8, the shadow split, strength versus vulnerability. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That's Carl Jung. And he wasn't just talking about dreams or childhood memories. He was talking about this exact dynamic right here. The son who humiliates his mother because he cannot integrate himself. See, when a boy becomes a man in a culture that worships strength, silence, and control, he's taught, whether directly or silently, that there's no space for softness. Vulnerability becomes shame. Neediness becomes weakness. Sensitivity becomes a threat. And yet, he was sensitive, he was dependent, he did cry. And who was there for all of it? His mother. So now, to maintain this polished persona, the one that walks through life untouched, unaffected, untouchable, he must split from the version of himself that once needed her. He creates a psychological fracture. One part becomes the strong man, the other is cast into shadow, and guess who ends up carrying that shadow? She does. Because she remembers, because she still treats him with warmth, because she still sees the child behind the mask. And so he lashes out, not because she's doing anything wrong, but because her presence threatens the illusion. Her affection feels infantilizing. Her worry feels emasculating. Her pride feels like a spotlight on the part of himself he's desperate to erase. So he humiliates her, not as punishment, but as disassociation. He tries to kill the reflection, hoping it'll make the original disappear. But here's the kicker. It never works, because what we disown doesn't disappear. It dominates from the dark. And the more he denies his past vulnerability, the more reactive he becomes when it's reflected back. That's why the mother who once comforted him becomes the enemy he feels compelled to humiliate. It's not about her. It's about the war he's still fighting inside himself. Jung said the goal of individuation is not perfection, it's wholeness. But wholeness requires owning both, the strength and the softness, the man he is today and the boy he once was. Until he integrates those parts, the split remains. And as long as he's split, someone else will always be forced to carry the part he refuses to accept. In this case, his mother. So here's where we land, my friends. The humiliation of the mother isn't just about behavior. It's about buried emotion, unhealed identity, and a son still at war with parts of himself. But the cycle can end with awareness, with boundaries, with the courage to no longer carry pain that was never yours. If this resonated with you, whether as a mother, a son, or someone watching this pattern unfold, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop this in the comments as your declaration: the cycle ends with me.